WIIFTBP.
This is Darlena Burnett, the author of best-selling book, Living History, inviting you to join me Friday, September the 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Freight to Plate, located 326 North Racine, for a book signing and discussion. Friday, September the 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Freight to Plate, 326 North Racine. Hope to see you there.
Monster Jam. Coming to Allstate Arena September 17th through 19th. Brought to you by BKT Tires. Visit monsterjam.com for event details. You have to see it live, so get your tickets today.
Yeah. Ooh. I miss your kiss. Oh, your kiss is one of a kind. It feels so nice. Girl, you do it right. I miss you. Oh, girl, you don't go too fast. You take your time. Just how I like. I miss you. Hey. Oh, you kiss it, then I'm drifting off your love. Keeps me floating, girl. I miss you. And ooh, it feels so good. I wanna come down. Girl, I'm missing that love. Come on. Ooh, babe, I'm missing all those kisses. Baby, bring those lips to me. Oh, babe, I'm missing all those kisses. Baby, bring those lips to me. Come on. Oh, when you're not around, girl, I'm tweaking.
Hey y'all, good morning. This is Tasha Napper here with I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media. We are back in our 8 a.m. slot, which is so exciting. And I see many of the people I've been missing when I was on at 10 a.m. have joined in. So welcome. I am glad that you are joining me today because I am sitting with my friend Lisa Foster. Lisa is a licensed real estate agent and she is a senior broker with At Properties. She's been in real estate for years, over 20 years now, and doing a darn good job at it, y'all. So I am excited to have her on the show because when we talk about divorce, a lot of times as you're getting divorced, property matters are a part of the divorce settlement. And so it's something that we have to think about. We have to think about in the I do stage. We have to think about in the I did and the I don't stage. So Lisa, before I do this though, I need you all who are listening to like, to share, and to follow. Now I want you to share this broadcast on your page. I would like for you, especially if you know someone who is going through a divorce or is concerned about property matters, tag them because usually there's really good information. The last show we did about real estate matters and divorce, I got a lot of feedback from folks who needed the information and really didn't have all the information they needed. So tag someone who might be able to use this information because it's going to be very, very helpful for them. And I want you to make sure that you are following 2 pages. My page, I Do, I Did, I Don't, and the What's in It for the Black People Media page. Absolutely fantastic content on this network that has been created for us. And it is specifically just, I think, presents the information that we need based on what's happening with the times and really, really is insightful and helpful for our community. So I really want you to make sure that you're following that page, because you will get not just content like this show, but absolutely wonderful content on several other shows that are here. So like, share, follow, and we are going to get started. Lisa, why don't you introduce yourself? I've said a little bit, say a little bit more to the audience about who you are. You might have to scoot up a little closer to your mic, but let's get into it. Let's talk about who's talking to these folks today.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Tasha.
Hey, Lisa.
Tasha and I have been friends for a very, very, very long time, undergrad.
Yes, right? We have.
And before a lot of life had happened to us, and we're still here.
Yes, together. Which is so fantastic, right? It's awesome. And it's good when you have your crew, your girls with you, the people that you know you can count on, the people you know who have your best interests at heart in your circle to go to. And even though we may not talk all the time, we talk frequently enough, but it's really comforting for me personally to know I have you when I have real estate matters and I have questions or I need to make a purchase. I'm coming to Lisa Foster.
And I appreciate that. And all of our talks are always pungent. And I think that another thing that will come up later today is your network.
Yes.
Right, is your network. So I will give a little bit about myself. I am Lisa Foster. I am a senior broker with At Properties, and I have been doing real estate for 20 plus years. I have a 21-year-old son at Morehouse College.
We should talk about that.
Engineer. I know his baby.
Yes. And handsome. She is such a handsome young man, and he's not just handsome, smart, and doing a fantastic job. Has his head on straight. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Very
proud of him.
Yes, I'm very proud of you as the mother who has helped to steward this young man. But you've also had a lot of community to help you too.
Absolutely. Again, the network. And also what I think is going to be, I'm going to wear two hats today. I'm also a certified residential appraiser. I don't talk about it as much on my pages, but however I am. And I think that's also a very important part of the real estate arm is to understand how values work, how they work in this space. And I just got a few notes to talk about that and make sure we can cover some of that too.
All right. So Lisa, we talked about meeting in undergrad. Lisa is an engineer also. Yes. And both of us have found other careers later in life outside of engineering. And honestly, careers I think that fit really well with us. So she moved into real estate, and I moved into brand marketing and doing this show. So, all right. So let's talk about this. So I like to start, Lisa, with, because we actually do have some questions that folks seeded earlier on. So I'll go on and look at those questions that were posted yesterday. But when we start thinking about real estate matters and divorce, let's talk about kind of what happens in divorce, right? So your divorce generally is, not generally, this is the Illinois statute, at least in Illinois. You are separating assets that belong to the marital estate, and now you have to decide who gets what. And how that gets divided, honestly, is a formula, and there's some things that can be negotiated, right? So with property, in most cases, you're going to share that equally unless you decide that I'm going to trade this because I want this other thing, like maybe I want to take my full pension so you can have the house.
Correct.
So that gets really tricky when you're trying to divide, especially if you have one property and you're trying to decide now, okay, who gets the property, who stays, who goes, who buys the other person out. And I'm sure that you've seen some very interesting situations pop up in your over 20 years.
Colorful.
Yes, colorful. I love it. I love it. So what have you seen? Let's just talk about an example, anonymously example.
Of course.
And kind of how you think that could have been handled differently or avoided. We want to talk even avoid this stuff on in divorce because there are things you can do up front.
Sure. So I'm not an attorney, and some of this is like, well, they really should be consulting with their attorney. So
absolutely. Some
things I will touch on that I feel more confident with, and there may be other things that you really want to seek legal counsel for. Any property that you acquire definitely during the term of the marriage is considered marital property, right? So unless you bought it in some type of other entity, i.e. an LLC or with another person that you have a written agreement with, mine is ours. All right.
Yep.
And then there's also two instruments when you're purchasing a property. You have the mortgage, which is the money, and then you have the deed. So he may buy it on his own. He's the only one on the mortgage. Even if she wasn't there to sign the deed, which if you're married, you have to disclose that, she's still a part owner of the property. So she may not be liable for the debt, but she does have say-so with permissions and rights with the property.
Right. So I want to unpack that a little bit to make sure we understand that. So when you are purchasing a property, you as a married couple, you can purchase that jointly, right? And both of your names are on the mortgage, which means you're both financially responsible, and both of your names are on the deed, which means both of you have an ownership interest in the property. You can also purchase it separately. So you can purchase it as a wife in your name only or a husband in your name only, which means you are the person responsible for paying the debt that's associated with the mortgage. In that case, then you can be the sole person on the deed with the ownership interest, or it can be both of you that have the ownership interest on the deed. Now, I think it's pretty important that if you are in a situation where, let's say you're a stay-at-home mom, you're not responsible for the mortgage, the husband is going to be responsible. Today we have stay-at-home husbands too, so let me just say it both ways, because it could happen both ways. So whoever is purchasing, if they are taking on the sole responsibility for the debt because they are the main source of income, it is the other side that you and make sure that your name is also on the deed and you have an ownership interest so that it cannot be sold without your input or permission. Let's say it was to go into foreclosure, for example, you would have to be notified and know what's happening with the property.
Correct.
If there was ever a lien placed on the property, all those things are important. If you are not on the deed, then a lot of things can happen without your knowledge. And that has happened to people before. I've definitely had conversations with women who have had no idea. They weren't on the mortgage, they weren't on the deed, and before they knew it, things had fallen apart and they had no knowledge nor say so in the process. So you do want to make sure up front that even if you're not responsible for the mortgage debt, that you are definitely listed on the deed as a person with an ownership interest. So when you talk about those two instruments, it's important that that you understand how that works. Because just because it doesn't mean that if you're not taking a debt that you can't be on the deed as well.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And just thinking about how that could be avoided, get involved in the finances. Finance is part of it, right?
Right.
It's not just the romance. It's not just the kids. It's not just the trips. It's a huge arm in the relationship. So understand the finances. And if you don't understand it, find someone who can help you understand if that's objective, or make sure that they have your interest at heart. There's a saying that says, buy the umbrella before it starts to rain in my business, right? So everything's beautiful and amicable in the beginning, and then it's like, oh, we don't want to cloud it with talking about money.
Yes.
That is when you want to talk about it, because when it gets nasty or on the other side, people start shutting down. You don't get the information that you need to kind of to move forward and make the proper decisions. So I say getting in front of it early. Again, even if you're not the person who's the expert, find someone who you trust is. Use your circle, your network to understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a lot of times
he or she could have bad debt.
Yes.
Right? Do you want to do that?
Exactly. And so it's such an important piece. And I think oftentimes we are intimidated, and especially as women, we are intimidated by the finances and by handling them sometimes. But then you have the other side where we're the person that needs to make sure, as women, we're the people that need to make sure that the bills get paid and everything is done, and we're going to be responsible with it. So you have both sides of the situation. In those cases, we just have to, it's tough. It's tough. I understand it, because as much as I can manage a budget at work, at home, it's like, I don't want to have to do this too.
Right.
And so because we can be so overloaded sometimes, you want to just let the other person handle it. And that can work well into your advantage, but you have to realize the other side of it. If there's no accountability, who knows what's happening and what's going on and what you are signing up for, because some things you're going to be jointly and severally liable for, which means that together you have the responsibility for the debt, but even if you separate it, you still have full responsibility for it. So it's important. It's really important. And, do what you can to try to get over that fear, to move forward, to be engaged in the finances at a different level. And it could be one little thing at a time to help you get it. It's so important to do it.
Very. It gets a little late.
Yes,
at some point, or it's just so overwhelming and it's kind of mounted up so much. You're just like,
Right.
if I wouldn't have known this 3 or 4 years ago, I could have positioned myself and protect, my family or the children. It's just very important. So it just behooves everyone to make sure that they're involved with their finances. His finances are your finances and vice versa.
All right. So you've done the work. You're involved with the finances up front. You're purchasing a property as a married couple, and you talk about some of the things that can be avoided, right? So one of those is making sure you're involved in the finances. So we cover that part. You're there. You're in it. You're attentive. You understand what's going on. You're having, maybe it's the monthly, let's sit down and pay the bills and look at where everything is.
Good.
And then you decide you're going to pay this, you're going to purchase this property together. So what things you see that I guess you would encourage people to do? We're not necessarily giving advice, but you would encourage people to think about or to do.
Sure. And, when you're together, you want things together. About, right? Just do to protect yourself. And a lot of that sometimes can be done, with getting involved, getting an attorney involved also, making sure that property is kind of written out properly to how you want things to be in the event that it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in the form of, it doesn't have to be divorce. It could be a death.
Yeah.
How do you want me to perform with this property in the uninsightful event that one of us expire? So getting an attorney involved, putting things in writing, again, when we are in the happier stages, because I think that we're thinking with our whole mind versus just so this person doesn't have it. Right? So what does that look like? Which child do you want this to go to in the event that something happens or someone gets incapacitated at some point? So there's a reason I might want to understand what happens to the property in case one of the principals are not able to perform.
Right. So, Reese, I'm not sure if you can hear us for the DJ, but we got a note, thank you, Tamika, that our mics are kind of going in and out, so we might need you to help make sure that's going okay for us. Thanks, Tamika. All right, so yes, so I hear you saying, 1, be involved, know what's happening with the finances. 2, you got to think about long term and realize that you're in this state of euphoria when you're kind of dating and honeymooning and everything is wonderful.
So cute.
And yes,
He's
it's going to be
teeth.
Straight teeth, girl. It's just so right. You like everything is just fantastic and wonderful, and later on you're just like, oh, why his teeth so straight?
Right.
Yeah.
You breathing through those straight teeth.
Right. We
like,
get
whoa.
irritated and things change and that should be expected. And so you have to make sure that up front you are thinking about, should this end in any way, whether that's a death, whether that is divorce, how will you end it? What will that look like? And how does that look in dividing your assets? It's a very important piece. And I would caution you, for those people who don't want to talk about that and who think that you're planning for failure, I would caution you because you need to be sober in your thinking about the fact that this could happen. Because if you think about it, we buy house insurance. We don't plan to have a fire,
Absolutely.
but we want to make sure that if such a thing happens, a fire, a flood, a robbery, whatever it is, if there's a natural disaster, a tornado, a hurricane, that we have the financial resources to take care of that, to protect the property, to take care of it. Again, auto insurance, we buy it. We don't plan to have an accident,
Absolutely.
but should we have an accident, we have the coverage that we need. And so I think that you have to think about marriage in a similar way. And for some reason we don't. We just get all googly-eyed and sunshine and rainbows and in the clouds, our heads in the clouds about it.
Absolutely.
And we find ourselves later in really terrible situations sometimes. We weren't willing to back and have those conversations. And they're difficult conversations to have. But I think the people who understand the benefit,
have a problem with it.
yes, absolutely. They don't. The people who don't, watch out. Watch out.
Two big things you just said there. You need to do it while you're sober. You're absolutely correct, right? When, things are okay and, things are good, everyone's got employed and, all things are kind of in alignment. And the other one was natural disaster.
Yeah.
Right? So it does hit you like a natural disaster. I mean, divorce is like one of the big six, one of the big things that kind of change your life. It's
Yes.
death, birth, wedding, and divorce. There's another one I can't think of. But, these things rock your world.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you are not you, right? You're in a space that you don't want to be in. You didn't plan to be in, and you have to make these massive financial decisions with all these emotions, and we're thinking kind of with our heart versus with our head, which is really, really important to make sure that we are thinking with our head.
Right.
Because, say, for example, a good example is that there was a time when someone asked for an appraisal for a property that they were divorcing, and they didn't like the evaluation because it favored the other person. But it was best for you to get out. Like it's an objective opinion, so it's still better for you to get out and move on. Don't worry about what they're doing, with that portion of it. So it's just like kind of taking that emotion out of it. So
What you can do a little bit up front, and it helps you, honestly, should you find yourself in a situation where you are divorcing, it helps you to take care of yourself then and not worry about how this ends and the finances and the fighting over it and the disagreement. Because believe me, they could be the nicest person in the world when you're married, and when it's time to divorce, it's not necessarily going to be that way. Like the gloves are off, all's fair in love and war. And so you will see a part or a side of someone that you've never expected to see and can feel like, who is this? Even when you're the person who's been wronged in a relationship, it doesn't, everybody necessarily go, okay, I messed up. So, let me just handle this well. No, it does not work like that. Now everybody's fighting for survival, right?
Absolutely.
And so they're trying to figure out, how am I going to land here and be well enough off so that I'm not, my life isn't falling apart financially. And if that means I got to take some from you, then people will do that and will be okay with this. So what you wind up doing is helping yourself, honestly, in the process earlier. If you plan, and that's been predetermined, you can actually walk through a divorce in a more amicable way. And you can take the time that you need to grieve and to start determining what life looks like next for you, as opposed to fighting so much for what life looks like next.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about kind of what are the things that you need to do up front if you are planning for marriage, honestly. So we have been covering the I do part, if you think about it, and planning up front and being involved with the finances, knowing what's going on, and making sure that if you're purchasing, that you are listed on the deed and not just on the mortgage, or even if you're not on the mortgage, you can still be on the deed. That's very important so that you understand what's going on and you legally have a claim to the property and have notification. So, all right, so we talk about those things, and now you're happily married and you're in the clouds and honeymooning and having a great time, and you get to the place where now you're splitting. And you think about, hopefully that doesn't happen. You know, I wish that everybody who is married has a wonderful experience and that they can grow and learn together, that they can walk through the phases of life, because life will hit you. It will kick you in the ass sometimes, and you've got to be able to weather that together. And so it's my prayer that everybody has that kind of experience and that kind of relationship that will weather those storms no matter what they are. But we know not more times than not, but probably half the time, that's not the situation. That doesn't happen. I think COVID has really helped people be like,
that's what you're really like. 'Cause we don't know people, right? Like, you know, to your point, you get married, the honeymoon, the newlyweds, then kids start coming, and like sometimes people get lost in that, right? You get lost in the baseball games and the juice boxes,
right?
You know, and then we're working 12 jobs, you know, and so we don't really see each other. And every now and then you might meet in the hallway, like, "Oh, hey, you got a beard?" Made everyone sit down, and really have to look at themselves and their situations, and things that may have been stockpiling over time really just kind of erupted over COVID, because you had nothing else to mask it, right? You didn't have work to mask it. You didn't have, you know, friends and going out. You know, as I understand it, divorce violence in Illinois was up 34%.
Damn.
As of this April.
Wow.
But there's some COVID babies too.
That's true. There's
there's
the other side of it, right?
There's the other side of it. And then, you know, sometimes it's just like, it may have been the sobriety that you needed because that person really wasn't for you anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes people got to take a minute, a break, a pause, and actually pay attention to their life and not just stay on the hamster wheel and running in the great race all the time, every day, day in, day out, that they didn't get a chance to just stop and take stock.
Sure.
So that happened with COVID. So, okay, 37%. Is that what you said? 34%. Wow.
It's a lot.
That is a lot. That is a lot. And so, all right, so this is valid information. It's very important information, and it's timely because people do need to know, all right, now that we're here, what are we doing? So, all right, so the court's going to say, again, this is not legal advice. You absolutely need to consult your attorney. But I'm going to tell you what I understand of the process. So the judge's job in the divorce is to make the decisions if you cannot make the decision. So if you two can agree on what you're going to do to separate, then the judge is there to say, all right, then I'll make the decision for you. The judge's orientation is, let me make sure that these two people, as they separate this marital estate, can both land on their feet, especially if there are children involved. That judge needs to make sure that both have what they need to take care of themselves so that they can take care of the children.
Right.
And so if you have one property and you guys can't decide if one's going to buy the other person out, if, you know, somebody's going to take one asset and you're fighting over who's going to get this property, sometimes the judge will say, all right, I'm going to give the property to the mom. Let's say you have the majority of the custody with time with the children, or parenting time. It's not called custody anymore in Illinois. It's called parenting allocation or parenting time. So you have the children most of the time. The judge may say, okay, you get this, but he gets this other thing and a larger portion of that in order to make this even, because it really truly is a formulation of here's how this splits out based on what you earn, what he earns, and what she earns, what he earns, and, how many children are involved. So the judge wants to make sure that you guys have it. The judge might also say, all right, y'all can't decide, sell the property. You get half the money, go on your merry way and figure out where you're going to live after that. And so it behooves you as a couple to figure out, what are we going to do in a way that we can live with, right? So I'm willing to give this up so that I can have this other thing. Because if you don't, the judge will make a decision for you, and you might not like that decision. Sure. So that's the way that this functions when you get to the end. Now, let's say that you bought the property before marriage. You refinance the property, and now you're both on the mortgage and both on the deed. Who has claim to that property? It's no longer just your property. Right. It's your plural property. And both of you have a legal claim to that property. And even in Illinois, we were talking the last time to one of the real estate agent that was on with us, LaDuina Smith of Homestead Homes. One of the things she said is Illinois is a homestead state.
It is.
And so, all right, it may not be your property technically, but you've lived there for the past 20 years. The law kind of favors the fact that you've been there.
Absolutely. And
you live there and you have claim to that residence, even if it hasn't been 20 years. I mean, I'm using that extreme example. But it is important that you understand how all of these things work together and where the judge's orientation is on deciding the allocation or the distribution of assets in the marital estate. So knowing that, then, all right, if you're in the process, this is the I did part, and now you're getting to the I don't part, you've got to figure out, what am I willing to give up and what am I willing to trade off? Because what is really important to me to keep, if the house is that thing, all right, then I'm going to trade off these other things in order to keep that. And you want to try to make that agreement, because, again, the judge's decision is going to be the final decision. Now, you guys can go back and say, okay, we want to redo this. All right. So you go back to court, you make a decision after that because you're not happy with the judge's decision. But again, you have to agree to that. You have to agree. And that becomes the final decision. So I have to imagine, Lisa, that you've seen several divorces and several divisions of property and just sometimes several messes, probably.
It's pretty nasty, especially like if they're my friends, right? Like if it's someone who we're friends. I'm a friend of the husband and the wife. Mm-hmm. It might not be a good fit for me, or they may say, "You're the only person we want to do this."
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, here are the rules. Here are my rules, and we kind of go through that. Mm-hmm. Arguing does cost everyone more money. Mm. It just does.
It does, because you're going to pay the lawyers while you're arguing.
Right.
And they are not cheap.
And you have to get to some type of a medium. And, if you can't communicate it out or decipher it, then someone will have to do it for you.
Right.
So I made a couple notes. Who gets the house in the divorce? And some things to think about and weigh in. As you mentioned a few times, one person can pay the other person out, buy the other person out, and that's a financial decision, right? That can be costly if that person has the money at that time or not. One person can live in the property until the home is ready to sell, or I've seen people both live in the property until the home is ready to sell. And I mean, like, those are like the adults of the adults that can, like, okay, he's on this wing, I'm on that wing, we're kind of living our life, and it's not all chaotic. So I commend them for that. You can sell the house and split the proceeds, of course. If you have like income property, you might want to keep it and become co-landlords, right? Mm-hmm. So I have seen that. And, that's, of course, when, you want to start getting things in writing, too, because then you're like, who takes care of the scheduled maintenance?
Right.
Who takes care of the mortgage, insurance, taxes, repairs?
Who's the tenant call? Because they're not calling both of you if there's an issue. It's
right.
like you got to really have that.
I don't know if you're talking to dude today, but my toilet is back.
Right, and right. I need him to come over here.
Yeah, and then what if that person wants to sell?
Right.
Then you can do like a 90-day, 60-day first right of refusal. You know, so those are some things to kind of think about if you have that. They have this thing called nesting. Nesting is when you keep the kids at home and then kind of you both kind of co-parent where you live in your own separate places. Expensive. Now you're making household.
Right.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So that let's explain that just a little bit more for people who may not have heard. This concept is, they call it bird nesting or something, whatever it is, but I've heard the term before. And actually, you know, it was a discussion even in my divorce is, all right, we have a home that we own jointly. Let's have the kids remain in the home, have no for their lives. Let's let me stay in that space, move in and out during as parents. So 3 days as the mom, as that house with the children, it's dad days as the dad, he's there in that house with the children. So what that means is essentially the children have a house, but you have to have somewhere to go when the dad is there as the mom, and you have to have somewhere to go when the mom is there as the dad, right? So you essentially are maintaining 3 households, which is quite expensive to do. And is that really in the best interest of the children? That's a separate topic on how you manage that and everything. But some people do. Some people work well, or the majority of us are not obtain 3 different houses, 3 different whatever, that sort of arrange. That's what leads in terms of the nesting situation.
Correct. So it's something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there other options that you're aware of?
So again, to get the person can become a tenant, right? So I could rent it back to you. Like I don't have anywhere to go, especially very expensive places like a New York or a San Fran where the cost of living is pretty high. You're like, look, I don't have the money to move out. I need to stay here until this home, sells or just, I can just rent it back to you. That's also an option. So yeah.
Wow. So we have one listener, Cassandra, who's saying that that whole discussion about the mortgage and the deed, that she found herself in an interesting situation where she mortgage, but foreclosure, she had closed, these things were happening of it had been purchased at that time. We've just take a pause for a second to say, for those who are joining, good morning. You are watching I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media, and I am your host, Tasha. And I have sitting with me today and talking about real estate matters and divorce, Miss Lisa Foster, who is a senior broker with Appraiser Properties and has been in real estate for many years, has seen many situations, and as a result of seeing those situations, she's sort of taking it and saying, all right, here's some things to think about in terms of how you can handle this when you're at the point of divorce. So we talked about the I do part earlier. We're talking about the kind of I did and I don't part at this point. And so Lisa was just giving us some tips that you can separate at that point. Like maybe you can't, and you have options. The property in order to temporarily and rarely find something else, get on your feet, or you think about a market crash and now you have a mortgage that's upside down, but you're divorcing during that time and now your value is way lower than it was. It's probably a smarter idea for you to stay in the property or someone to stay until the market recovers, and then you can both benefit and earn more at that point. So lots of things to think about, not just what do we want to do, but what's happening economically at the time, and how do we, again, make sure that everybody is under. Even though many times we're like, Exactly, or can live under a bridge, like the judge is not good point of view, and that but legally this is how things shake out, and so everybody has some rights in the process, whether you like it or not. And let me tell you, what you think is morally fair is not what is legally fair.
Absolutely.
So you have to understand legally your head around early on. Okay, what do I say and what I need in this process and understand process is going to be unless we so
what too, as you were seeing some people, I'm just gonna walk away, I don't want to deal with it. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Do not do that. Do not ignore it. Don't hide under a turtle shell. Like, you need to confront it, even if you have not been dealing with it. Okay, that happened, whatever. Because divorces can be very nasty and very damning, even if there's not a fight, even if there's not a big asset like this involved.
Right.
You need to know what's going on with the finances, especially now that you guys are trying to live separate lives.
That's a really good point, because sometimes people have things that you're not even aware have been acquired during the marriage, and you would have claim to some of those things. So let's say somebody had, in their work compensation. Let's just say somebody decided, I'm going to use an extreme example. Somebody decided during COVID, hey, I got some time. Let me see about this stock market and day trading, and things have gone down, and I got $2,000. I'm going to put it in AMC. I'm going to buy AMC and see what happens. And then, the whole thing with Robinhood takes off. AMC, more than, it's like, I don't know, quadrupled in value, probably even more than that. And they sell it. They sell the stock. So their $2,000 has now become $20,000. You had no idea they even had a stock account or tried this, right? But you would have a claim to some of those dollars. But if you just walk away and you're like, I don't even want to deal with it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want nothing from him. I don't want nothing from her. I just want my life back. I'm ready to go. You could be foregoing, and you would be foregoing. I'm not going to say could be. You would be foregoing a lot. And there are times that now, okay, so you have claim to the assets, right? But you also have the debt that gets assigned to you as well. So the other part of this story could be that someone ran up all kinds of debt because we were just sitting at home and Amazon was delivering every time we order something, and next thing you know, you got $20,000 in debt because you've been shopping online or whatever. You decided we're going to be here, so let's redo the house, and I've ordered all these things and new furniture, and we've remodeled something. So now you've got the debt. That debt also gets allocated in divorce.
Correct.
And it could be in a credit card. However, it's marital. You're married when the marriage, and so that also that I want to just walk away, whatever, because you're getting debt assigned, you're going to be responsible for it financially.
You need to know what's going on.
Exactly. So that it's not a great situation when we want to bury our heads and just not deal with it, or it's so painful sometimes, and I understand that it's painful. You don't want to really feel that pain, but you have to face it. You have to walk through it, because it does get better on the other side. But you got to know what you're going to be faced with and deal with. Exactly. You got to get to the other side. I have seen one a situation in court when a woman was before the judge and her attorney, and they were making an agreement. She was like doing her final, this is what I'm agreeing to in this settlement. And as a part of that, she was saying before the judge, so she had to be sworn in and all that. And so she's saying to the judge that she understood everything, that this had been explained to her, and that she was making a decision to not take any of the interest she had in the husband's pension. And the judge was like, he said, do you understand that this should, part of this would be yours, and that you can't have that in a divorce. Do you understand that? And she's like, and he said, so you don't want it? And she said, well, I didn't feel like I had any other options, and this is what was explained to me. And so the judge finally said, you know what? I am not going to accept that. Like, okay, you are saying that you understand, you agree. I'm not sure that's true. And he said he doesn't do that often. But in that particular case, that woman was walking away from thousands of dollars. Wow. I mean, like significant money that I guess the husband had sort of tried to maneuver in a way that was making her feel like, well, if I want this, then I can't have that. And she really did not have all the information that was available to her. Yeah. In this case, that judge did right by her, right? And saying he didn't accept her saying this is how she was going to do it. He was like, nope, you need to go back. You need to have some conversation with your